All right, our next presentation here will be from Steve Mulberry and Tyler Prahl from GIS Inc. I'll turn it over to them.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Thanks everybody for logging in and joining the session here. We're happy to provide a presentation here at the annual conference. It's been great so far, liking the new virtual platform, and definitely enjoying the previous sessions. So Steve Mulberry here on our team is going to deliver the content here. I'll help field some questions and things, but we've got an exciting kind of non-traditional topic here to talk about. So get after it, Steve.
All righty. First off, I got to make a shout out to Clinton, if he's still on. If you have access to these shirts, Clinton, I don't know if you can. Esri stopped selling these things about 10 years ago, and I want one. It's getting old and ragged and things like that. So I want these amazing Map Man shirts if you can find one out there. All right, so as Tyler mentioned, we're going to talk about some technology that you may or may not know about. You may be familiar with some of these terms or how they might integrate or be innovated inside of the ArcGIS system. So we're going to spend some time talking about webhooks, application links, and eURLs. So let's get started here. Let's begin by talking about what these things mean and what they can do. So webhooks in general is a way for you to either augment or alter the behavior between applications, either web page to applications or applications within applications. And it's done in a sense where it's where the calling application is sitting there listening for information. There's no need for you to sit there and keep reaching out and asking, did something change, or is there information there for me? You know, what's happening? It's just listening, and when something gets sent to it, then that application then behaves based on that. And that can take place within the ArcGIS system, so between ArcGIS products themselves or other third-party providers out there. Think of it like Survey123 can be configured through a webhook to send information to, say, Outlook calendar to set up a new activity or an email or something like that. So Outlook calendar becomes that listening application for information and then reacts to it based on whatever information is passed over to it. Now, application links is sort of an open standard between, well, I guess webhooks is also an open standard too, but think of application links as a way to communicate between native applications running on your smartphone. So you have an origin or a starting application that talks to a destination application. Again, that could be within the ArcGIS ecosystem or third-party applications. And this is done by extending the metadata that is a part of a URL. We'll get more into that here in a second, but think of things like if you're in Collector and I got some information and I need to then navigate myself to that asset or that feature that I'm collecting. Collector can send information via URL in the metadata to Navigator. Navigator can open up and then build that route for me automatically to get me from point A to point B. And then you have eURLs. This stands for Enterprise URL. And I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't heard about it, but this is a Cityworks sort of branded technology or the use of technology. The underlying technology that Cityworks uses to create this eURL is open source and is supported in the ArcGIS ecosystem. But they sort of coined this phrase to get information from Cityworks into the ArcGIS platform that does this through a JSON representation through a URL. So think of it as a feature service URL. So much like we're familiar with adding feature services into our web maps or other applications, you can actually reach into Cityworks via this feature service based URL to get data out of it and into the platform. So I could use ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise or whatever to grab data in real time and put them in my dashboards and maps and things like that. So if you've ever heard of a term called deep linking, this is basically what they're talking about. Using one of these technologies, webhooks, app links, or eURLs to extend the capabilities of how you work between applications, between platforms, between mobile devices and things like that, the applications that are running within your mobile device. So let's go in a little bit deeper here and talk about each one of these. So let's start off with Survey123. So this is webhooks inside of this context gives you the ability to trigger activity or trigger automation within Survey 123. It's done by using the HTTPS post protocol. I can trigger emails or text messages or social media posts or data recording and other platforms, all via webhook. And these are done by leveraging one of these connector providers. Now, there's several of them out there. I'm going to focus for this discussion on Microsoft's Power Automate, but you can see there's Integromat and Zapier and Tray and others out there that you can use to configure these webhooks, again, to allow things like Survey 123 to talk to some other application there. So think of it like this. If I'm in Survey 123, I can configure Power Automate to then send something to Outlook Calendar or email or one of the hundreds of other connector providers out there, these actions and these items. And there's literally hundreds of them. And there's probably more of that based on the provider that you use. So if we're looking at here, this is a quick screenshot, and there were pages of it inside of Microsoft Power Automate, but you can see some of the examples there where I could create these web hooks between Esri and other things out there. Office 360 tools, you can see SharePoint and Twitter, notifications, RSS feeds, and so on and so forth. Let me show you and walk you through this example here. So this is a pre-recorded demo. On the left here, I have Survey 123 open where I'm designing a simple survey called webhooks. It's got a location picker that allows me to start my location. A pickup type, this is a simple little drop-down box that allows me to pick up, in this case, trash types, container, can, bulk item, and then a scheduled pickup. And I've hard-coded some information in here for this demo, but again, it's a quick little simple 3-step survey. And once I save and publish that out, this is what that survey is going to look like, right? Pickup location, the type, and the schedule. And I can use this then to communicate information through Microsoft Power Automate to trigger some kind of activity. And there's several ways you can create and start this flow process here. There you can see here on the screen some options to getting started here. I can simply trigger the start the process here, give it a name. And what's important here, though, is I start to search for Survey 123. You'll see it's already an item inside of the flow diagram. And I can pick that item and start creating my process flow. And all I need to kick this off is the unique ID to my survey that I created. So I can go right back out to my survey and grab that unique identification number there at the end of that URL and bring that back in, populate that in this box here, and then begin going through the next step. So what's the next action item I'm going to do here? You can see I have access to all these hundreds and hundreds of different action items, things that I can do and perform against this. So what I want to do is go back to one that I've already created here and kind of show you that process. So here I got a 4-step process. One, I'm connecting to a survey. There's that unique ID. Then I'm going to make sure I'm in the right time zone, depending on who's submitting this. I'm going to send an email and then create an Outlook event in my calendar as well. So there's the 4 simple steps there that I'm going to perform. So over on the right is my Outlook calendar for when I record this demo, sitting there waiting to kind of show this communication. So I go back to my survey and initiate this survey. So I'm just going to start the process. It's going to find my current location. I'm going to pick from the drop-down list here, bulk item. I'm going to use the default values. Then I'm going to hit submit. Now, as soon as I hit submit, webhooks send that information over so that, webhooks is listening for information, and they're going to process that. And you'll see that my bulk item then gets automatically added to my calendar. But I also said send an email over. So then my Outlook should receive that email. In this case, here it is, and it notifies me that the bulk item was scheduled for pickup on this date and time. So you can kind of see how you can leverage webhooks to extend what Survey 123 is doing already by collecting information, but also then maybe alerting people or setting up calendar invites or text messaging somebody, extending that process and sort of closing the loop on whatever you're trying to do with inside of that survey and that process. Another way of leveraging webhooks is inside ArcGIS Enterprise. Enterprise gives us the ability through webhooks to trigger events and or automate the things that we want to monitor. So basically these activities that happen inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, maybe I'm I'm going to monitor the things that happens within items when an item is added or removed or shared or deleted, or whatever is happening with the items or groups or users or roles. There's lots of stuff that goes on inside of ArcGIS Enterprise. And as an administrator, I may want to monitor activity and get an email, say, or do some kind of activity based on what's happening inside of ArcGIS Enterprise. And all this is done through the same protocol, HTTPS request. And basically, there's this payload that gets sent over through this webhook process. Now, ArcGIS Enterprise comes with 3 ways of creating this payload and/or doing the communication. One is that there's a Java Servlet SDK that you can use. If you're familiar with how to write Java servlets out there, you can use that SDK. You can use one of the third-party providers like Power Automate, like we just showed, or Enterprise also comes with a custom web service using Node.js to write this process. So in this example, I'm going to use Power Automate again to listen to activity that's happening inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, and then send an email alert based on that activity that I want to monitor. So one thing to note as you go through this process inside ArcGIS Enterprise, in order to manage webhooks, you have to go to this URL. So whatever your portal URL is, go to that /portal/sharing/rest, and that'll get you to the screen that allows you to get to the heart and soul of ArcGIS Enterprise from all the management processes. So let me show you that here. So here I'm accessing my portal, my demo portal. I'm going to change that URL to sharing rest. And then when I get there, I'm just going to click on my unique ID, my organization's ID right up here at top. And then down at the bottom of this, you'll see all those management components. And one of those is webhooks. So we'll click here, and this is where I can create and manage all my webhooks. So we'll just start the process here. And basically, it's pretty simple. All I need to do is provide a name, provide my payload, and we'll talk about that here in a second. If I want to pass over any confidential information like a unique ID, I can do that here in the secret option. I can set up some configuration parameters. But the key here, and I'm going to leave all that default, but the key here is what activity, what trigger do I want to look for? And here I'm going to say, I'm going to look for anything that happens to items within inside my portal. So how do I create that payload now? So here I'm back in Flow, Power Automate, and I'm going to create a new flow that allows me to communicate from Enterprise to an email. So start the process here. And in this case, I need to create this HTTPS communication protocol between the 2 platforms. So I grab this activity. It requires a JSON schema body here. And Esri, nicely enough, has already created this content for me. So you go to the website, create and manage the webhooks, scroll down about midway through the process here, and it already formats this payload URL. So I'm just going to grab and copy and paste that off, bring that back over to Power Automate and paste that inside of my JSON payload. That's all I need to do here. So I've got that payload created. Now the next step here is to add the next trigger or the next action item. In this case, I'm going to add a step for emailing. So I'm going to look and search for an email connector provider out there. You can see there's several of them out there. And I'm going to grab the Office 365 one. And because I'm connected to my domain, I just start typing in a name, and it's going to find all those folks on my domain. I'm going to grab that. Now here, as soon as I clicked in the subject line, you can see the parameters off to the right there for that payload. And I can use one of those parameters. Here, I'm just going to put a portal alert. But in this box, this user options here, I'm going to actually grab one of those parameters out of the payload. You can see all of them here. Here, what I'm interested in is what operation is currently being triggered over there at ArcGIS Enterprise. Is it adding, deleting an item? What's happening here? So I got these 2 steps in here. I save. Now, when I save this URL gets generated for me automatically. This is your payload right here. So I just copy that payload, go back to my webhook, paste that in there, and now I've finished configuring this webhook inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, the name, the payload, and what I'm looking for. So then I just finish up here by creating that payload, and I'm looking for that success equals true up there at the top. That means it's created it's good to go. I can start using that. If I bump back here a few pages, you can see now that within inside of my webhooks management tool, I have that new webhook, and now I can start to use that. So we'll go over, we got the webhook created, we got it configured within Enterprise. If I jump to my portal here, and actually I got my portal here, my website here, or my email Outlook here, so we can show you how that works. I'm going to add a new item. So I'm just going to go out and browse and find a spreadsheet here, and I'm going to upload that spreadsheet. I'm going to begin this process of creating a new item inside of Enterprise. Now, just because I created this and started this process, ArcGIS Enterprise has already triggered that event. I could finish this out if I wanted to, but in reality, Enterprise has already sent an email saying someone's trying to add a new item. So there's my portal alert, and there's an operation add. So somebody is adding a new item, and I could extend this to say a lot more here, but I just want to kind of show you the process. Now, if I go back to my content and forget about finishing this, if I just say cancel this process, by virtue of canceling it, ArcGIS Enterprise recognizes that and says, hey, someone now is trying to remove or delete an item from the enterprise. So this is pretty powerful from an administrator standpoint. I can create these webhooks and look at information. Maybe I'm going to track when people are added or removed, or maybe when permissions are changing between users, or when someone's sharing content to someone else that maybe they shouldn't be sharing, right? I can keep track and monitor all that activity that's happening here just by configuring these webhooks. All right, so let's move on. We've got application links now. So let's talk about that a little bit here. This, again, gives me the ability to pass the state between one application to another application. And this is a very common workflow. We do this all the time. If you ever open up your web or your phone and go to your contacts, grab your favorite contact, hit the call button, it goes from one application to the phone application, and then executes whatever was passed to that calling application. So we do this all the time. And there's a sort of a common URL schema between platforms. iOS has theirs, Android has theirs, BlackBerry and Windows. Esri has standardized on the iOS style URL. So it doesn't matter what platform you're using, iOS, Android, or Windows. Esri is going to use the iOS standard for passing information back and forth between these applications. So it doesn't matter what I do, I can always rest assured that standard is going to stay the same. So for the example that I showed earlier, if I'm an explorer and I'm looking at information and I want to identify one of these features and I want to route myself to that feature, that's where application links come into play. Pass that information over to Navigator. Navigator then opens up and starts the process. So let's walk through this. Here's an example. I'm in Explorer. I've got some basic information here on the map. These are work orders. I can click on one of those work orders. I can look at the items here. There's two items in there. One of them is a reported leak. I can click on that reported leak. I can look at the details. And as soon as I click on directions, it's going to fire up Navigator with that location and my location, give me the route and directions. Okay. So if you walk through that again, just kind of walk through that with me again here. We've got this application. We've got these features and things that I'm looking at here. I click on one of those items. I look at the details. Again, this is the reported leak one. And again, as soon as I click on directions, you can't even really tell. It's sort of seamless here. Navigator just opens up and starts to execute based on the information that's being called to it or being sent to it. And this happens throughout all the ecosystem, whether it's Explorer talking to Navigator or Survey talking to Workforce or Indoors to Collect or whatever it might be. This is how that linking, that deep linking takes place here. Now, what's really exciting is that Esri's taken these applications, these 5 or 6 field applications, and starting to merge them into one application called ArcGIS Field Maps. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's been released, and currently the capabilities of Collector, Explorer, and Tracker are now built into ArcGIS Field Maps. You can get all 3 of those capabilities together into one application. And what's important to note here, so you just kind of keep in mind that because those capabilities are now inside of Field Maps, there is a deprecation lifecycle here. So as of December of this year, Collector, Explorer, and Tracker will be deprecated. So keep that in mind as you start to plan out how you use field applications. And then this year and next year, Navigator and Workforce will make itself into Field Maps. But as far as application linking going, goes on here, whether if you're going to create other applications or if Esri is going to communicate from field maps to other third-party applications, it's still the same concept, still the same process. Application links are still going to work and behave the same way. All right, so let's close up here on eURLs. Again, this is a Cityworks sort of branded use of technology, but under the hood, you'll see here it's open source stuff. It's stuff that Esri provides to the open community here. It's based on saved searches inside of Cityworks. So if you're not familiar with Cityworks, it's an asset management permitting system that allows you to manage your jurisdiction there. And inside this environment, you can create these searches. Maybe you want to see all the open work orders for your water department. So that's tied directly to data. And when you produce this search, it creates, you can tell it to use this eURL concept, and it creates this REST endpoint to this URL that is nothing more than a hosted feature service, things that we're already used to working with. So it's a REST-based feature service endpoint. It's a payload that you can then pass over to ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, and start getting dots in a map to represent whatever search it is that you're looking at there. So let's go through this process. Let's go into Cityworks. Let's save a search, and let's then consume that inside of ArcGIS Online. So here is an example of a Cityworks deployment that we use for our demo purposes. I'm going to go in and create a new search. And you can see it's pretty comprehensive here on how I can configure and define what information that I'm interested in. But in this example, I'm interested in all open work orders in the water group. So basically, I'm just going to jump in and say water for my entity group, go down to my work orders, and as long as they're not closed, I want to see all that information. So I provide those simple two parameters here. I could get more sophisticated with that, but I provide those two, and then I hit the search button to make sure first I'm going to get back some information. So there's that list. There's all the open work orders that fall within my water group. It could be a department or whatever. And now, so once I have that there, I save it. And when I save this URL, or this search, I can provide security to it. So in some cases, I don't want to expose some of this information. I can provide that to a specific user or a group or domain, whatever I want to. I have control over how that information is transferred to the ArcGIS system. So I save that here. And then if I go back to my saved searches, we should see that now as the top one there in my list. And if you look over to the right, so there's that open work orders for ArcGIS Online that I'm using. If you look over to the right, it says eURL equals true and that service. So if I click on that service link, it gives me the endpoint. This is that hosted feature service. And all I need to do then is grab that URL, and I can take that into either ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So here we'll go over to, I have ArcGIS Online up and running. We'll go over there. I've got a map started. So I'll just add a layer from the web, paste that URL into that box there. And then immediately I see those open work orders coming out of Cityworks. Now this is live data. So if that work order is modified or changed back in Cityworks, then my map is going to see those changes here reflect. And because it's now just a layer inside of the web map, I can treat it as such. I can configure my pop-up windows. I can change the symbology. I can look at the table structure. I can treat it just like any other feature service within inside of my web map, which means I can then pump that right into a dashboard. So I create my web map, configure my layer there, and then I throw it into a dashboard, which then gives me the ability to extend my visualization capabilities of this information and share that out with the organization via the dashboard. So let's kind of recap here real quick. WebHooks allows me to sort of augment and alter behavior between the calling applications themselves. You saw the example with survey, sending information to Outlook to create a new event and email. Application links are more fine-grained into native applications, talking between them within your smartphone device. And then eURL allows me to communicate from, in this case, Cityworks to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, giving me direct access to that information. Now, we're going to see these technologies get more integrated into the ArcGIS system across the board. Right. So as a developer or as an analyst or as someone who's configuring these applications, you're not going to need to know a whole lot of development skills to get started. But if you want to extend that even further, then you will have that capability from a developer's perspective to go deeper into that. So we're seeing a lot of advantages of this, ways to further innovate the way we collect information, share that out through other applications, and or trigger other activities and events within these calling applications. So I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this. If you have any questions, you want to reach out, you can hit me up directly or Tyler, or just go to gisinc.com and look at how we're leveraging this technology with some of our customers there. So thank you. Tyler, I'll turn it back over to you, or if there's any questions in there that we can ask them.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we'll just give a minute and take any questions if they come.
I see someone say my t-shirt's in the silent auction. Nice. I'll be heading there right after this.
I double checked. There's a couple of them in there for you.
Lori, set up a simple email webhook while listening. First one, nice. Way to go. It's not that hard. I mean, come on, you just did it. It's not that hard, but it's pretty powerful in the way it can extend the way you use both all the platform, all the systems, and the services and things like that. All right, I think we got it, Ryan.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, Tyler. I really appreciate it.